Welcome into episode 6 of the All Things Mizzou podcast presented by Missouri Tigers on SI. Missouri is coming off a 51-0 shutout, dominating win. Put in all the adjectives you want. They straight up ran over the Murray State Racers to open their 2024 season. I'm Joey Van Zummeren, and joining me, as always, is my fellow football reporter, Michael Stamps. Michael, how are we feeling after week one and midway through preparation for week two?
Happy college football to all the football watchers out there, not just the Missouri audience. NFL starts on Thursday as well, so that's quite exciting. As far as Murray State goes, yeah, that was not a painful watch, but definitely wasn't the most thrilling thing on the planet. Definitely was good. It was good to get in the box and experience the game from that angle. So that was fun. And yeah, Buffalo is a team with a pulse. So much more to
Damn.
much more to talk about. Much more to prepare for on our side, as well as Coach Drinkwitz and the Tigers. So I think there's a lot more to look forward to. They're going to be better. I'm not going to say it's going to be a close game or not, but they're definitely going to be better. They've seen some of the guys. Coach Drinkwitz knows head coach Pete Lembo seems like pretty well from past coaching days and things like that. So they have some information on the Bulls, and obviously they had a week one against Lafayette. Full game tape of now everyone who got snaps against Lafayette for the Bulls. So there's stuff to watch. There's stuff for us to preview. There's obviously a film for Coach Drinkwitz and his team to watch as well. So I'm not gonna throw out a score or say it's gonna be a close game, but preparation is gonna be a little bit easier this week. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Drinkwitz said after the Murray State game, it really took them 4 plays to figure out exactly what Murray State was going to do. On Tiger Talk tonight, the radio show with Mike Kelly, Drinkwitz said that Johnny Walker had detected a pre-snap tell from Murray State that would indicate whether they were doing a run or pass. And Johnny Walker had to have figured that out in the first two defensive drives because Drinkwitz said that had helped them out on the Toriana Pride interception. Zion Young knew it was going to be a pass. Bull rushes his right tackle all the way through to the quarterback, causing the ball to land in the hands of Toriana Pride. So easy matchup for Missouri in week one, as it should have been. At risk of rehashing and recycling the same ideas that we have been for the past 3 or 4 days on this channel, on the website, and on anywhere else you find Missouri Tigers stuff, we did want to do just a quick brief review of this Murray State game. Some of the things we learned, some of our takeaways. I know for both me and Michael, one of the main things was that both of the starting running backs are going to be good, even though it is Murray State, a weaker opponent. Both Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll really passed the eye test, really look like extremely athletic, extremely quick guys that are going to be able to take on the torch from Cody Schrader. And then after that, just a standout performance from a lot of players on the defensive side of the ball. First shutout since 2019. So strong performance defensively. I think better than offense. Offense had that second quarter lull. So overall, though, not too much that Missouri can complain about. Michael, any of your key takeaways from this Murray State game that we haven't mentioned already?
Probably not. We talked in that post game show. Marcus Carroll was ridiculously impressive. Didn't realize he was that fast. He made some ridiculously impressive cuts. Obviously, Noel was really as advertised. He's exactly what I think we thought he would be. He was fast, quick, shifty. Got involved in the passing game as well. I think a standout on the defensive side of the ball was the defensive line.
Yeah.
Coach Drinkwitz mentioned today that they have 5 to 6 guys. I think he said 6 specifically that can really get in and make an impact at the defensive tackle spot alone. Not even mentioning the guys who can play on the edge. Chris McClellan was impressive. Christian Williams was impressive. I believe Marquise Graciel came in and made 2 or 3 tackles. Sam Williams got some play time. So there is a long list of guys on that in that defensive tackle spot who can make their presence felt. And you go out to the edge. Zion Young had the pressure, brought the pressure on what eventually led to the Toriano Pride interception, which you can argue good throw, bad throw. Not really. It was not a good throw, but
yeah, I don't think that's very debatable.
Yeah, not debatable at all, really. But Young still brought the pressure, so he looked impressive. And yeah, really the defensive line stood out to me. Chris McClellan is an absolute animal. He is a beast. It's not even just talking about the sack that led to that eventual fumble. He just looked strong, powerful. He was mowing guys down. And obviously you look at the guy and you're like, yeah, he has the size and power, raw strength to make an impact and do exactly what he did. To see it against competition was a different thing. So really impressive outing from them. You said it best. Nothing to complain about. I don't have any disbelief that Cook's going to improve in weeks to come, and he's going to work out those kinks with a deep ball. I think that was a complaint, and some people had questions there that he missed the mark on 2 or 3 of those deep balls. And Drinkwitz said it best. I think it was today that he had the right read. It was a perfect read. He just got a little bit excited, right? Missed him by just a little bit. So those things are going to get worked out. That's what these early, first 3-4 games are for. Maybe not first 4, maybe first three games are for, to work out some of those issues, roughing out the edges and improving those areas.
Yeah, if I saw one complaint from Mizzou fans in this game or one concern, it was really just Brady Cook's deep balls. And I don't have any concern on Brady Cook eventually getting that down because he showed it in practice. He's showed it in games multiple times last year. I don't think there's really any real concern about it. I think it is weird that he had 4 pass attempts over 20 yards and 3 of them were 5 yards ahead. I mean, the one to Marquise Johnson where they're going south, Marquise and kind of looks like he slowed down a little bit on that one. And I believe the last one was an underthrow. So again, though, I don't think there's any real concern there. I think it could almost be, I'm not questioning Brady Cook's mindset or headspace, but you're really not getting into a rhythm in a game like this, especially when you're up 28. I think a lot of those I don't think they'd be taking those shots in any other game, any other situation, except being up 28 points to Murray State in the second quarter. So no doubts that Brady Cook will be able to get on a better page with his wide receivers. As far as what you mentioned on the defense line, I think that's a great point. It's what I'm writing about this week. There's an insane amount of depth in the front 7 as a whole, but then also on this defensive line. Like I said, Drinkwitz mentioned 6 deep rotation, and I don't know if it's the 6 guys are going to be playing all the time consistently, just because that's a lot of rotation. That's a lot of guys to be bringing in and out every single play. But when I asked him that question about the depth he has on the front 7, he took it exactly where I wanted him to. Of there's no real concern of a drop off when they have to sub guys in, and then also they have the freedom too, though, to really just play guys where they're best suited. So, like you said, you had Chris McClellan in there a lot, Christian Williams in there a lot as well. Looks like Christian, unsurprisingly, was the main guy, and then the second guy was being subbed in and out quite a bit more frequently. Marquise Graciello, Sam Williams, Sterling Webb, all seem to be kind of at the same level. And we've heard about Sterling Webb just because he's a talented transfer. We've heard about Marquise Graciello this fall camp. Sam Williams, not as much until just this past week. Drinkwitz talked about him on the Tiger Talk radio segment again today. So that defensive line room, front 7 as a whole, just has a lot of depth there. So excited to write about that tomorrow. I'll be sure to look out for that article coming this week. Michael, any final thoughts from this Murray State win?
I mean, if we're going to talk about the defensive line, I didn't see, obviously, from so far away, all the Jalen Marshall snaps, but that's a guy you can throw in there too. Obviously, he did some good things as well. But no, I mean, if people are gonna, not that people are complaining, but I mean, you won 51-0. At the end of the day, that's all.
Yeah.
That's all you can ask for. You handled business against a team that you need to handle business against. So, was it perfect? No. Did you score 51 points and hold them to your first shutout in 4 or 5 seasons? Yes. So, pat yourself on the back. Move on to a more proven, more challenging opponent.
To put this game to bed, it is time to pick our players of this game. It's a tough one because no player really had a dazzling stat line because nobody played 100% of snaps or even over, let's see, nobody even played over 66% of snaps. Toriano Pride Jr. was the player who took the most percentage of snaps, 66%. So nobody really was able to put a full quarter game in just with all the rotation and substitutions they were doing. I think if I had to pick out a standout performer, it is the one who played the most, Toriano Pride, based solely off of 2 plays that he made of the pick six, obviously. Again, we talked about that in our game recap, the read he makes there, jumping up to grab that one. And then also the wide receiver screen where he just blows through a wide receiver that is trying to block him. So that's my standout performer. Michael, any guys stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of avenues you can take. A lot of really consistent performers across the board. I'm going to go with Marcus Carroll. He was just the person I was impressed with the most. And it's not to discount Noel's performance. We don't need to get into it, but you look down the line of running backs. I mean, Q and Lacey rushed for 42 yards. He was ahead of Carroll in rushing yards. Not that, that entirely matters. But Tavris Jones and Jamal Roberts got some carries as well and didn't look like stellar, but they looked good. It was nice to see some fresh people at the running back spot when we only saw 2 last year, right? So it was nice to, right. So it was refreshing to see some guys, but yeah, I mean, Carroll just looked so impressive. I almost positive I said this in the post game show that went out on Thursday night or Friday morning, whatever you want to call it. But Noel was advertised as the quick, shifty guy. Carroll was advertised as a third down, power rusher, throw him in the red zone, and he was just so fast. I'm not saying super fast, lightning fast like Noel, but he looked so fast. Made some super impressive cuts. Obviously had a nice touchdown as well. Had some good chunk yardage plays, which again just took me by surprise a little bit. And it was only 6 carries for 35 yards. So I'm assuming we're going to see more from him, hopefully this week. But obviously in weeks to come, it's that running back room is going to get narrowed down quite a bit. So Carroll's going to be the guy I go with. You can go a lot of different avenues. I want to give one more shout out before I'm done. We're done with this part. Blake Craig. Blake Craig went 3 for 3 on his field goals, and granted, I believe 2 of them were under 30 yards, and one of the longest one was 39. So it's not anything super insane. It's not 61 yards, right? I don't think that's the expectation. To see some consistency from a guy that's not Harrison Mevis had to have been refreshing to not only Coach Drinkwitz and the special teams and the team as a whole, but just to Missouri fans in general. To see a guy go make 3 field goals. So shout out to Blake Craig. Sounds like he had a great fall camp and they have full confidence in him.
Absolutely on Craig. And I think, again, just kind of a under talked about point for this Mizzou team. It was in fall camp, the fact that they were putting all their trust in sophomore. Obviously, Blake Craig was a highly rated kicking recruit by Coles. But again, you never know what to expect with kickers, and his first performance, at least, like you said, Michael, aced all of them. Before we turn the page to Buffalo, I did want to talk about a few of the things going on in college football in the first week of the season. So many storylines took part in this first week of the season, especially when you look at these high-profile games, LSU, USC, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, compared to when everybody else in the SEC is playing these very small school opponents and blowing them out of the water. Those games draw even more attention. Michael, any of your key thoughts from this week and from a Mizzou centric point of view?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we point our attention to Boston College and Vanderbilt. Um, by no means did Boston College look like a superstar team against Florida State. We don't need to go into Florida State. Boston College, however, show they're versatile with their quarterback Thomas Castellanos. I think he's big on his legs, a big read option guy. Sounds like that Missouri is going to see some of that with CJ Agbana and Buffalo this week. We'll obviously get into that later. So sounds like they're going to get a good test and a good feel of what that's like heading into that one. Kai Robichaud, their starting running back, looked excellent as well. Very powerful. He had a boatload of carries. I'm not going to go as far to say Missouri's offensive line is better than Florida State. Not enough sample size of that yet. They picked Florida State's offense or defensive line apart, and there is no denying that. I mean, they do have a talented defensive line on paper. So to pick that apart, I personally don't know if that says more about Florida State's defensive line or how good Boston College's offensive line and how good Castellanos and how good Kai Robichaud are. So that's something we're going to see this week. I believe they played Duquesne, and then obviously next week when they come to Columbia. And then another shout out I wanted to get, and I might butcher this name. I'm going to try the best I can. His name is Donovan Ezirwaku.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. I think we know who I'm talking about. I don't remember hearing his name on the broadcast. Unfortunately, I would use that as a reference. He looked really good. He made Florida State's, I can't remember what his name is, but one of Florida State's offensive tackles who was lights out in week 0. Even though they lost, he was excellent. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He embarrassed him and got to the quarterback multiple times. So that's going to be a guy that whether he's playing on the left or right, I can't quite remember. You can, throw that out there if you do. I want to say it was the left side, but again, correct me if I'm wrong. That's going to be a guy that the Tigers need to circle on defense for sure, whether he's going up against Marcus Bryant or Armand Membo. So that's a guy I need to look out for. Obviously, Vanderbilt, big name. I think really the only one that we need to throw out is Diego Pavia, quarterback transfer from New Mexico State. Not only did he, I think he threw for around 200 something yards in the air, but he was money on the ground, which another example of another quarterback who's going to be able to hurt people on his feet, which makes this Buffalo game probably more important than people realize. If it's hard to neutralize a guy like Agbana, which is nothing against him, I don't think he's the type of runner that Castellanos and Diego Pavia are. If it's hard to neutralize Agbana and they, there are some errors and some holes when it comes to stopping the read option and design runs and, him escaping the pocket and things like that, could be an area to watch out for those following 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but outside of that, though, nothing crazy. I'm not. It's week 1, or I guess second game for Florida State too. But for Boston College and Vanderbilt, it was week 1. So we don't have a ton of time to see how good they are before those matchups come around. Obviously, Vanderbilt 1 extra week than Boston College, but Boston College should handle business this week. So they'll have more taper then, but they're going to be interesting matchups for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Boston College really getting on a lot of people's radar, and I think that's mostly because of the off of the benefit of Florida State just straight up not being a good team, but having that number 10 mark to the left of their name this past week even. So there's that, but again, they're going to be a more legit challenge to Missouri than people initially thought. We don't need to get into people on Twitter hoping game day comes here because I don't think that's going to grow out of anything else than Twitter chatter. It would be exciting, but I don't think it's going to happen. And then same thing with Vanderbilt. Going to be another tougher test than Missouri was. Well, not that Missouri was expecting, but the outside world was expecting it to be for Missouri. And I think it goes to show Eli Drinkwitz's point, not only with Florida State, who was ranked one spot above Missouri in the AP poll rankings before the season, not only with Florida State's 2 losses, but then also the fact that you got Boston College looking good against them. You have Vanderbilt looking the best they have in a while, upsetting Virginia Tech team. So as far as the strength of schedule, I always find it silly. People start picking apart the strength of schedule immediately when the schedule comes out. Not as much with college because you find out like the opponents a year or two before, but with the NFL for sure, you find out the schedule in May. Obviously, you know the opponents at the end of the previous season, but people spend the whole offseason being like, oh, they have a really easy stretch here. They don't have to play a tough team for like 9 weeks. It's like, well, a lot changes very quickly. And again, to Drinkwitz's point, you can really use Florida State as an example of last year being last year, and last year does not matter. The only record people are going to look at is 2024. So obviously, Florida State lost a lot more talent. They lost a very talented quarterback in Jordan Travis. But again, really good example of Eli Drinkwitz's point. The one thing that doesn't really impact Mizzou football that I just wanted to bring up this week, and it's not necessarily anything that happened this week. I'm not going to make fun of Clemson for losing to Georgia or call them a bad team because of it. And I'm not saying this to pounce on Dabo Swinney, but it does get more and more funny to watch every year his reluctance of the transfer portal and then them blow. Well, not blow isn't the right word, but to lose these games early in the season, lose these big time matchups, and kind of fall out of their prestige with Dabo's again refusal to dip into the transfer portal, and just the irony of it, comparing it to how Missouri has handled it. And I think specifically, obviously, Missouri is not the only team to use the transfer portal. Clemson is the only one that hasn't, basically. But the way that Drinkwitz builds his team and use of the transfer portal, he not only cares about the player, but especially with the success Missouri has now, they can be selective with the guys they are bringing in. Drinkwitz says that they are in high school recruiting, they look out for guys that they know are going to be culture fits, guys that have a chip on their shoulder. And I would think that carries over to the transfer portal again now that they can be selective. So Dabo Swinney's whole thing being, I don't want to use the transfer portal because I want to make sure that these guys are my team and that I can really foster them, develop this culture in with them. And I don't want any outside forces just coming in here. Compare that to Eli Drinkwitz, who has that same fear. Like, that's a very valid concern from Dabo. And I think that's a lot of coaches and just the college football world as a whole, reluctance and hesitation to fully embrace the transfer portal. But adapt or die, right? And Eli Drinkwitz has certainly adapted to use the transfer portal in a way that is beneficial to him. I think as college football head coach, it has never been more important to just be a culture builder. I mean, you're basically just a motivational speaker and a door-to-door salesman. Like, that's basically the 2 top job requirements for a college football head coach at this point. Drawing plays up, sure. I mean, some could find success in that if that's your main thing, but you got to be really good at the other 2, and you got to be the face of the program. You got to be somebody that recruits can like. And obviously, Drinkwitz's decision to give up play calling plays into this, but it's changing. And I mean, it is ironic too to see Toriano Pride, a Clemson transfer, come over here and get a pick 6 in his first game. We heard from him today, really seeming to enjoy his time at Missouri so far. So that's my comment on Dabo Swinney. Again, like I said, I know a lot of people like to make fun of him, and I'm not trying to join in on the dogfight, but it just becomes more and more funny with every season, it feels.
For sure. I'd love one quick point. I love what you said about culture building. And I'm going to bring in another head coach into this argument or
Mhm.
conversation. And it's not to, diss anybody because I think he's a great coach. You compare, and I unfortunately saw this scrolling on Twitter today, but you compare a guy like Brian Kelly to Ed Orgeron. Okay, one is clearly, I think one is are non-debatably a better X's and O's guy. Brian Kelly knows how to play call, knows how to build a team as far as fundamentals and things like that. You can argue that not that players don't like him, but when you look at a guy like Ed Orgeron, he had his team bought in, they loved him, and they won a national championship. Not comparing the talent of the two teams because I think that 2019 team is definitely better, but I think there's a difference in the way they approach things. If you look at how a guy like Drinkwitz approaches things, like you said, the decision to give up play calling does I think it does show, not that he wasn't culture building before because I think he definitely was since he's been here since day one, but how important it is now. Um, when it comes to player retention and things like that. And you don't have to like the transfer portal as a coach, but it is here. And it's at the point really where if you don't use it, you're going to fall behind. Not to, you know, lay the hammer down more on Clemson, but over the last couple years, last 2-3 years, you can argue that they've fallen behind a little bit from where they used to be. And I respect a coach who wants to buy fully into player development, and I think you've seen it work out. Just off the top of my head, you look at a guy like Peter Woods, who appears to be one of the better defensive players in all of college football. He was a super high rated recruit. You don't see all the high rated recruits stay around for all 4 years, whether that's going to the NFL early or transferring out early. You look at a guy like Walter Nolan, who was one of the best recruits committed to A&M, and I believe he's at Ole Miss now. It didn't take him long to leave. So I respect a guy who wants to focus on player retention and player development. And I think for the most part, players are bought in to that. But you have guys like Toriano Pride, who is a top 100 recruit. He leaves one talented team to join another talented team, and he's getting an opportunity and is using that to the fullest. So not to beat the hammer down on Clemson, but it like you said, it's adapt or die. And you've seen teams move ahead, maybe like a Missouri. Ole Miss is another one who appears to have a very strong roster who clearly utilized the transfer portal this last offseason. So it'll be interesting to see how some of those teams who maybe aren't utilizing it are going to, I don't want to say drop off because Clemson they have the talent, right? But it's gonna be interesting to see how teams who maybe utilize it more heavy than they do, start to rise in the rankings and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, Drinkwitz, it's not like he's a big fan of all of the changes that are happening in college football, but again, the ones that are able to adapt the quickest are going to be the ones that benefit the most from this because it's at this point the toothpaste out of the tube for a lot of what is happening in college athletics. And I did want to talk a little bit about Boston College back in this. It's so interesting. We'll obviously have plenty of time to talk about BC next week, but it is so interesting that they hired Bill O'Brien to replace Jeff Hafley, who is now the Green Bay Packers defense coordinator. But Bill O'Brien, what we were just talking about of the key traits you need to be a college football head coach in this day and age, that's not what Bill O'Brien showed in his time as NFL head coach. He was not great at those. If you remember his history with DeAndre Hopkins, just how much of a mess he left that organization, that locker room, after getting in some talented guys. Deshaun Watson comes in as a draft pick, and obviously some of that downfall for Watson's career is self-inflicted by Watson. But it was an odd hire, but he's having success now. And one of the challenges that schools like Boston College, Notre Dame face in the transfer portal is the fact that they have much higher academic standards than everybody else. So it's not like they can welcome anybody in. They have to have guys that meet their academic standards. So again, we'll have plenty of time to talk about Boston College next week and a unique program that they have right over there building up now. Moving on to Buffalo week, we got to view a little bit of open practice today at Missouri. So some of the key things that we noticed today, obviously, like we talked about all fall camp and these open sessions, there's not all that too much to climb onto, but a few injury updates that we were able to see. And now, obviously, I do just have to say some of these could hypothetically be they just were not in the media session. Maybe they came out a little bit later. We don't know exactly what these injuries are for a lot of these guys. However, when this episode comes out, so on Wednesday, there will be the first ever, I'm guessing, mandated injury report for the SEC coming out. So we'll get an update from Missouri on all their injury reports Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then I believe it's an hour and a half before game time. So at practice on Tuesday, though, Brett Norfleet was not practicing. He left Thursday's game with a upper body injury. Theo Weiss was out there, though. He had a hip injury in Thursday's game. With both Weiss and Norfleet, we just heard from Drinkwitz after the game, him saying that they were both more precautionary. So we'll see with Norfleet. I'm a little bit surprised. 4 days removed from the game, he's still not practicing. But, I mean, again, we don't see practice for every other day of the week. So it's possible today he was taking a rest day, and this is just part of his recovery. And then quarterback Jamarion Wayne, who missed Thursday's game with an unknown injury. He was out there practicing today. And then also, this not surprising, but Jordan Harris, who was banged up throughout fall camp, banged up before week one, but was active for week one, was out there practicing again. Other than that, there was not any injuries or absences that I noted from Mizzou football practice. So there's that. Obviously, not having Norfleet would not be ideal for Missouri, but you want to. Another part of being precautious is not only in game, but also unless he's 100%. Really, if he's not 110% this upcoming week, there's no reason to play him or Weiss, but Weiss seems to be fine. Other than that, moving on to this Buffalo game, Michael, you mentioned CJ Avana, their quarterback. It's quarterback Missouri faced in 2021 when they played SEMO. Avana, like you mentioned, is a mobile guy. Missouri got its fair share of mobile quarterbacks last season. Obviously, the big one being Heisman winner Jaden Daniels, and they struggled to contain him. And I think what's kind of lost about mobile quarterbacks is that it's not on the designed runs they beat you on. Like obviously, it's if you're playing against Lamar Jackson, he's probably going to break off a 60-yarder against you every once in a while, and that's difficult to contain and isn't great for your defense. But I think it's more so just on the little runs they get, the little scrambles they get, especially on third downs that will kill you. Jaden Daniels had a few of those last year. You move your defensive secondary back, all of a sudden you got Jaden Daniels has 10 yards of green grass in front of him. So that's going to be something, like you said, Mike, more than anything, it's just going to be a really good test for Missouri this upcoming Saturday. I think be interesting to see who they put on quarterback spies, mostly because it felt like last year was mostly Tyron Hopper, who's the quarterback spy guy. So if I had to guess, I would say that would be Khalil Jacobs, just because he's the most athletic, rangy guy, kind of similar skill set as Hopper. So we'll see how Missouri does containing those guys. And Drinkwitz mentioned that Missouri's just going to have to really be cued in on their reads. They do a lot of zone read options in this Buffalo offense. So will be interesting to see Coach Batoon's game plan for that. Michael, what other thoughts you got on Agbana and everything else on this Buffalo team?
Yeah, he didn't necessarily light it up in the air when they saw him last for Southeast Missouri State. Only 53 yards, only attempted 14 passes. I would like to think he's gotten a little bit better. He threw for 195 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, similar situation with Missouri and Murray State. They played Lafayette, so obviously not the greatest tell. I think it's interesting. He's listed as 6'2", 220, so he's a little bigger for a mobile quarterback. And it'll be interesting to see if he's truly a mobile quarterback or if he's a guy that was able to break off some big runs. Coach Drinkwitz made it sound, I mentioned very early on here, that he's familiar with Lembo's offense and scheme and things like that, that the option and things like that, the reading the read option, that's going to be an emphasis in practice and obviously when they take on Buffalo. So sounds like he is a little bit more of a designed run guy, not just a dude who can break off some big plays. Other than that, it's still a little bit challenging to really see who the big guy, the main names to look out for. I mean, we can look at the stat sheet. Sophomore receiver Nick McMillan busted off 5 receptions for 76 yards. Boston College transfer Tajee Johnson, 2 for 39. They both had touchdowns. Tajee Johnson's a pretty big guy. He's 6'3", so little more physical of a receiver there. Other than that, I think they're gonna. I would like to think they're gonna have more weapons. Jaquez Barksdale is their running back, 14 carries, 99 yards last week and a touchdown. He did a little bit of damage last year too, 248 yards, 2 touchdowns on around 50 carries. So he's semi-proven. He has some experience, which is going to be, I mean, just from the scouting perspective, that's a guy that you can go watch last year and years prior to see what type of player he is. Excuse me. I think the biggest name to keep an eye out for, and someone asked about him, earlier this afternoon at Coach Drinkwitz's press conference, and that's linebacker Sean Dolak. He was only played a little bit last year, had a season-ending injury year prior. It sounds like he was all conference, and I wasn't aware of this until doing some research prior to the show. He had 135 tackles in 2022, which is no joke. I don't know the exact number, but I'd imagine that was towards the top of the NCAA as far as tackle leaders go, just knowing what that number is like generally year to year. So he had 11 and an interception, so clearly he has some range, can drop back in coverage a little bit and obviously hit some receivers and running backs. So I think that's going to be a guy they probably try to avoid, I'd like to think. Other than that, I think that's really it. They have Eddie Pleasant. He's a transfer from Michigan State. He threw down 4 tackles. So this team definitely has more dudes than Murray State. I don't think that's any surprise to anyone. They're going to have more playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. I think generally, though, like we touched on previously, the focus is going to be Ogbonna. I don't know if I mentioned his rushing stats, but 5 carries for 20 yards, which is nothing crazy. But the last time they saw him, it was 12 carries for 99 yards. So I would imagine they don't want that to happen. And I mentioned this prior as well. I think the big emphasis is really going to be how can we contain the read? How can we not let this guy break off big runs? Because they do have to play guys like Thomas Castellanos from Boston College and Diego Pavia, in weeks shortly ahead. And I guess we'll see after Saturday night how good of a runner Ogbonna is. But Castellanos is no joke. Pavia is no joke. Those guys are legitimate threats on their legs. That's what they're known for. So it's going to be a huge tell to see if Missouri's ready for quarterback threats like that. And obviously, when they get further into the SEC, you're looking at a guy like Jalen Milroe, who is a different breed of that sort of mobile quarterback. So it's going to be good tells for that. But immediately, I think it's going to be important to see how this Missouri defense can shut down the read option and not let Ogbonna break off for big chunk runs.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Drinkwitz called the main challenge today. And they lost a lot of their pass catchers, but really on defense, they have 3 or 2 stars there. They got Sean Dulek at linebacker. Sounds like they really move him all around in the box on the edge as pass rusher. And then they got defense back Marcus Fuqua, who I believe had 7 interceptions in 2022, tied for the best in the nation. So like you said, a lot of more talented guys, but still hard to know exactly what to expect with a lot of transfers that they got playing in at key positions. Obviously, new head coach. I wouldn't be surprised to see some fake punts, some interesting stuff on special teams. That's Pete Limbo's background. Drinkwitz mentioned today that that's something they're going to have to watch out for. They know what Limbo is capable of drawing up on special teams. It's just a matter of when they do it. Limbo was with South Carolina from since 2021 as their special teams coach. They had a fake punt against Florida in 2022 that worked really well. So, I wouldn't be surprised, just like Murray State tried to pull off with a opening kickoff to surprise Missouri last weekend. Don't be surprised, I guess, if Pete Limbo and Buffalo tries to pull out a fake
bold.
punt. It truly was.
Again,
I think Buffalo's going to have the same reasoning. Maybe they'll try to do, when Missouri got down in Kentucky 14-0 and we're about to punch it away again, be a good situation for Buffalo to try that out. And again, like I said last week, I got to respect Murray State's decision because to make a wacky upset happen, you got to do some wacky stuff, make some wacky plays. So we'll see what Pete Limbo, first-year head coach, has up his sleeve. And tomorrow or next week will be the first time we are not talking about a new head coach from South Carolina. So with that being said, Michael, any other thoughts here before we wrap this up?
No, I personally am more excited to watch Missouri play Buffalo just from a football fan standpoint. I think it's going to be a more competitive matchup. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a little more narrow of a score. I'm not going to go as much to say that Buffalo will win because they should not. But I think the combination of that they have more talent in that offense. Agbana I think he's a big play threat waiting to happen. So that's something that could pose a threat. Obviously, like Drinkwitz said, it seems like with special teams, it's more of a matter of when. As far as when they bring out some sort of special formation or a trick play or things like that. So definite concerns, not concerns, but things that could pose challenges against Buffalo this week. It's going to be interesting to see how they respond. I'm not going to say this is Missouri's first real test because it shouldn't be, but should be a little bit more narrow of a scoreline and maybe a little bit more competitive.
Yeah, Mizzou was 48.5-point favorites was the final line, I believe, for Mizzou versus Murray State. And now Missouri opening line was 31 points over Buffalo. So still a big margin, like you mentioned. But, hey, we've seen crazier things happen in week 2 of Missouri's seasons under Eli Drinkwitz, at least last year, looking back to Middle Tennessee State. They cannot have another performance like that again. I don't expect them to, but if they have a performance, if they only beat Buffalo by 4 points and it takes a stop at the last minute, and it takes a safety, and it takes Brady Cook pulling something out in the fourth quarter, then they will not be in the top 10 next week. I can say that too, at least. And, no matter how much adversity that Middle Tennessee State game provided for them and maybe how much fire that gave them going into K-State, you don't want to have that happen to you in week 2 of the season against a team that did not perform well in the MAC last season. So with that being said, we're going to wrap this episode up of the All Things Mizzou podcast. We appreciate you tuning in. I'm Joey Van Zummeren. He's Michael Stamps. We both cover Mizzou athletics for Missouri Tigers on SM. Make sure you check out all of our coverage over there. We'll talk to you later.